Instead of concentrating on a piece of equipment or system on Battleship, Texas, we're going on an artifact treasure hunt. However, before we do, I'm going to ask that you watch this video all of the way through and click like to help us make some money. All earnings produced by you and others for the next 30 days will go directly to the ship for repairs that are currently taking place. So please give us about 11 minutes of your time and then click the like button. Thank you, and now let's go look for some treasure.
When Battleship, Texas was decommissioned in 1946, there was no coming back for her. So the Navy stripped off everything that they thought would be useful. They also took out pretty much all of the supplies, spare parts, and everything. But there's a few hidden treasures, and so that's where we're going to go and take a look at some things that are still in pretty good shape that one would never expect to find on board.
We're about to climb through that deck hatch located to my immediate left, where we will visit the Lucky Bag.
We've just come down this ladder from third deck into a compartment that's called the Lucky Bag. This served as the crew's lost and found. Anything that was lost that didn't make it to some other sailor's pocket came in here where it could be reclaimed, but it also served another function. It's located directly above the main battery plotting room. And the main battery plotting room could get pretty hot due to its unfortunate location above some heated oil tanks. So initially what was installed is this heat exchanger with plumbing, and they basically just tried to cool the air using seawater, which was completely insufficient, especially if they were going to be headed to the South Pacific to fight the Japanese in 1944 and 45. So when they stopped over in December 44 in Hawaii, they got permission to install a Freon air conditioning system, and that's what we see here. Here's two electrically driven compressors, here's some heat exchangers, and this provided chilling through a big commercial air conditioning unit that was installed in the overhead within the room. So Freon was piped back as a gas into these compressors, compressed into a liquid, and from there it was sent back to the evaporator. Now another thing that we can see is there's the manufacturer's nameplate there, and then also I'm trying to remember where it was, but there's even a label added by the contractor that installed it that says Honolulu, Hawaii. So here's one neat little treasure.
Our next stop is just a few feet forward in a compartment called Electrical Stores.
We climbed back up out of Lucky Bag to the third deck and then descended this ladder into a real treasure trove of parts that weren't removed from the ship. This is an electrical parts storage room, and as we move around we can see a lot of smaller loose parts. Among them are heating elements. I'm not really sure what they were for, but they could be used as dryers in electronic equipment, very small space heaters, and that kind of thing. Particular interest are these carbon rods. These are replacement arc rods for the big searchlights. As we move up, we can see even more heaters. And over here, we have big resistor grids. These were part of the controls for the electric steering motor used to control its speed. There's a big armature on the forward bulkhead, and as we move around we can see that there are numerous boxes that are marked for spare parts, including a box for a multi-purpose signaling light, but unfortunately the box is empty. But we do have electric motors, and then we have a whole bunch of replacement armatures. One of the most common ways for electric motor to fail was in the armature windings. So this made it a relatively easy job to split the case, replace the armature, and you're back in business. There's a couple of larger ones here that have protective enclosures around their windings. One other thing that's really cool is this interesting looking kind of camshaft object. This was the major activating device for the boat cranes. A number of switches would be placed along it so that whenever one of those circular pads rotated under it, it would activate the switch. And this is what was used to control the swing of the crane up and down, tilt, and everything. So and this is a pretty special room. We're really glad it's here.
Our next location will keep us on the third deck, and it's just a short distance from our first two stops.
We're back on the third deck level, and we've moved forward as far as we can go, and it stops just short of where the turret 2 comes down, its barbette structure. But this essentially seals off where we're standing from the front of the ship, with one exception. This big blower duct here has a door in it. And if we look through, we can see access that carries on forward in the ship. This is, again, A111. It is the forward blower space. Difficult climb, very low. We're on the port side looking forward. Sorry for the bad camera. I'm having to climb over obstacles. As we walk forward, we're walking around the outside of barbette number 2. Here is a storage rack of replacement motor armatures. As you can see, quite a number of them. Armatures of all sizes. A thermostat looking aft at the armatures. Now sweeping around, here's a blower motor. We're now walking across at the forward end of the compartment to the starboard side. Once again, more motor armatures. Again, more blowers. And looking aft on the starboard side of A111.
Our next stop will require a long walk back along third deck, where we'll make a somewhat difficult climb down and visit refrigeration parts stores.
So we climb back up to the third deck and we move much farther aft. In fact, we're standing about 400 feet from the bow, and on the third deck is where the refrigeration or ice making room is. That's where they made refrigerated water that was used to cool ammunition powder magazines. But it's a pretty difficult climb in here. You have to get around that combing and come down this ladder, negotiate this big pipe, which is the induction line for the port main engine condenser, and all the while trying to avoid this big opening with this open deck hatch that would make for a pretty nasty fall. Give you an idea of where we are. That big enclosed box there with the open manhole is where the 2 sea chests are that provided intake and discharge of cooling water for the port engine condenser. But the main reason we came here, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see worth a darn, because we have to open this caged door, and even though I was able to unlock it, it's blocked by some cables that are hanging down. So what I'm going to have to do, pardon my moving around in hands, is just peek through the grating, and what we're going to see here, there's a bunch of seals and gaskets hanging from a pegboard there, and we have other spare parts, a lot of small ones and a lot of larger ones on shelves over here. This is a spare parts room for refrigeration. So let's, after this kind of disappointing trip, let's go back up and we're going to go one more place.
For our last stop, we're going to climb back up out of refrigeration parts stores, go across the ship, and climb down into the starboard steam passage.
So we're now in the starboard steam passage, which contains the heavy steam pipes, big 17-inch main steam lines, and also others that travel from the aft boiler room all the way back to the other far end, where they turn in and enter the, in this case, the starboard engine room. Now, this room got exceptionally hot in here because it doesn't matter how well insulated you are. Some of that steam is at 417 degrees, and the heat's just going to work its way through the insulation. So you couldn't do much in here, but what you could do is store parts that really didn't care what the temperature was. So in here we have some various pipe fittings. As we move forward, they're thoroughly wrapped, but these are, in this case, high-pressure circulator valve pistons. And we have some more devices. In fact, there's a screw gear for a worm gear. And then to me, what's a real treasure is if you've watched any of the Tom Scott the Older One videos of the engine room, then toward the end of it, we talked about the thrust bearings that absorbed all of the energy coming up from the propellers and put it into the ship. Well, these are replacement shoes in that took that thrust and applied it to the hull from the discs that they sat over. So these are just a few of the hidden treasures in there. If we find more, then we'll certainly let you know about them.
I really want to thank you if you made it this far through the video, and I would ask the one last thing of you, which is to click that like button, and that way we can earn as much money as possible towards saving our ship.